welcome everyone back on into the Just Start the Conversation podcast. It's brought to you by St. Luke's University Health Network. My name is Crockett. Very happy to always be joined by the wonderful Amie, Alanson, Dundon, and Jody, McCloud, Missmer. And, to give a little insight into this show, I think we all enjoy doing it because it's called Just Start the Conversation. It's taking something, an issue, a problem, something we're feeling, something we're recognizing in someone else, and saying, hey, maybe there's a way that there's an egg that needs to be cracked. Let's crack it. Let's try to get to the bottom of this thing. And in preparing for this show, often well in advance, we've got ideas of where we want to go or topic ideas. And then unfortunately, there's weeks like this week where the incidents and occurrences that happened in Texas are just you're taken so aback by it. You can't believe it, but unfortunately you do believe it, just kind of the way things are. So honestly, we were kind of getting ready to do this episode, and it was like, is this just a vent episode? Is this just a talk episode about what maybe we're feeling, what's going on? And I think we're going to do just that. So once again, I want to say hello to Amie and Jody. Good morning, my friends.
Good morning.
I'm gonna turn over to you guys. Just let's start a conversation about everything going on this week.
Wow, what a week, right? I mean, what a year. But then we look at this week, and we're faced as a nation with another critical incident, another tragedy, another day that we always say, let's make this the last one. Let's hope this, we never have to go through this again. And now we're bringing our next generation of kids into what happened at Sandy Hook and the list of hundreds of other school shootings before that. And it's at the point for me where, as a psychotherapist and as somebody who is a helper and a healer of mental health, that it's starting to feel really difficult to have the right words
with your patients, or just in life.
Both, but more both. And I think that's because, and this is not even necessarily not just patients,
right,
but as human beings, you want to be able to be supportive and comforting to each other and to have the right things to say to each other. And sometimes we just need to hug each other and to kind of say, this really hurts. I'm here for you. What part of this can we control?
I think, though, what often happens is that a lot of times people respond very impulsively to situations like this, and much like any situation, need to blame and finger point. And so unfortunately, the hugging that you talk about is delayed or maybe never happens. And I think that's the piece that I wish there was a period between the finger pointing and the tweets and the Instagram posts, that people took the time to do that piece, because I think that's what's missing. And I'm not saying I'm not guilty of that. I don't use Twitter, but and not because I've been kicked off, I want to be clear. But it's not, you turn anything on and everyone is blasting in every direction. And I think that it's really fair to say that the majority of our nation needs a hug on this one, right? And not on this, not just this one, but it certainly is that pause that doesn't happen and really needs to happen. And it's what those families need. Like, that's the part that, those families need, that compassion and that love, and not the fighting and the violence and the meanness. But I think it's hard to get to those points. But I think it's a natural reaction. I'm assuming it's a natural reaction to humanity to want to find fault and blame and
Well,
kind
sure.
of finger point.
You know, by nature, we're fixers, right? We want to find the source of the problem and we want to fix it. And if we can't, then we're going to blame everybody around us who we think should be fixing it. It isn't, and isn't. And that is human nature. From everything from a minor fender bender all the way up to the big stuff.
Although I just saw this the other day. So here was a good thing I did see on Instagram, and it was a fender bender, and it was a gentleman on a motorcycle who got hit by a car. It wasn't a horrible, horrible accident, but you know, she clocked him a bit and he went flying, and he got up and he walked to her car, and she was maybe like a 17, 18-year-old girl, and he gave her a giant hug. Oh, and I was like, holy moly. But it was in the moment, that was his response. Oh. Yeah, it was pretty cool. So it's funny you say that, because I just saw that.
That's a perfect example, though.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to hug it out, Crockett.
Sure. You know, I think, Amie, when you were kind of first kickstarting this part of the conversation, you kind of took a beat where you were talking about with patients and kind of what you feel personally, because I'm sure for you, look, I guess you guys certainly reflect on your own practices quite a bit when you're working with patients, and in a situation like this, you know, I'm sure it's got to be really hard for people that are experts in this, in understanding and comprehending, in taking a deep breath and taking a step back. I can tell that a situation like this week for you, Amie, was one that you're just like, not throw your hands up in the air, but just kind of like, you're at a loss for words.
There were some tears shed by providers this week in my office, because the emotion, if we don't get our own emotion out, then how can we help other people with their emotions? And it's such a human need to have a safe place to talk and vent and emote. And it is hard. It's hard and it's not hard. We're trained, right? So even in the worst and the hardest of circumstances in psychiatry, we are trained how to shelve our own stuff, right? And have that meaningful, therapeutic conversation. And we do that very well in the midst of tragedy and crisis every day. It's when big stuff comes up unexpectedly that, you know, your psychiatrist is human too. And he needs to take a minute to vent and to get it out. And it may be literally 30 seconds. But then, you know, then we move on. And I think what I'm trying to convey to patients is, you know, we have something called the circle of influence in psychotherapy and psychiatry. And one of the things that I teach when I do didactics and teaching for our psychotherapy residents, we talk about what's in that patient's circle of influence, what's within their ability to control, what's out of their ability to control, where do those two things overlap and intersect. And I think for something like this Texas school shooting, it's important to evaluate what's in my circle of influence. Who can I impact? How can I impact? What can I do that's meaningful for my community and for myself, where I can move forward and at least know that I've been authentic.
Oh, I like that. I think that same approach could be applied to any kind of work environment, because you need to offload some of this emotion in a safe place with people who you can share openly with, or that you can vent to, and then continue about your day, whether that's you know, a cashier, whether that is a construction worker, whatever it is. Having the ability to have conversations and kind of segment some of those pieces, you really need to do that, just to get through parts of your day, which I know is different than what you're describing related to providing therapy.
You're right. I mean, and you know, people are angry. And I think a few seconds ago, we were talking about social media and the expression of anger. And people express anger in lots of different ways. And what I like to also, I use this metaphor a lot is, really, if you picture a big iceberg and you have the water line, the anger is what you see on above the water, on the tip of the iceberg. It's all the other stuff under the water that really is what the anger is about. And people are angry, and some people take to social media to express their anger, and that's their right. That's their right. And I just wish that more people would be more open to talk about their feelings and what's really underneath the anger. I think that's how society is going to start to get some answers.
Yeah.
Is if we stop just focusing on the anger and we start to look at the frustration and the sadness.
But now you're asking me to look inside of myself, and it's way easier for me to just turn that mirror around and just face it to you.
Well,
like
sure.
That's a huge, like you're now asking introspection for an individual who's never looked beneath that waterline before. And that's, how do we get other people to say, why does this make you so angry? And in a situation like this, you would think that it's obvious why people are angry, that it involved innocent children, that it was in an environment where it should ever happen. I mean, at any point in time. But to your point, the levels within that anger, we all bring something to the table. Oh, yeah. I'm upset about it for maybe a completely different reason. In addition to the things we share that we're upset about it, I may have additional reasons why I'm upset about it.
Sure. But if we're not talking about those additional reasons, we're never going to get to the root cause.
Yeah, that's just a huge ask. I mean, we started this podcast to start a conversation about mental health because we know that people are like, yeah, I want to talk about that. I'm more than happy to rip you apart on Twitter, but I am not talking about that. So I think if this conversation helps people say, yeah, you know what, I might want to look inside a little bit before I, call names or make judgments or alienate my friends who feel differently or have different opinions or have different beliefs. I need to look introspectively. I mean, we're seeing people in our own work life. You shared a story about someone sharing with you kind of in their personal life, sharing something that happened that you don't necessarily expect. I think it's important to talk about that.
So yesterday I had a professional come into my office. We're collegial and we work together, and great person. And this person showed me a picture on their phone of a little preschool class of 3-year-olds huddled in a bathroom stall for a shooter drill yesterday. And this is a colleague who I have the most respect for. And immediately and we have words for everything. Trust me, it's what we do. And there were no words. There were tears.
Sure.
And this was their child's preschool group that they were seeing. And so I immediately, we stopped talking, Amie and I, when she told me this, and I think we need to talk about this tomorrow during this. And so it reminded me of my mom, who is 86 years old. And she told me that when she would walk home from school, when the sirens would go for I believe, and she would correct me, I'm sure, but it was for atomic bomb alerts. So she would be, I don't know, she graduated, I think, in 1953. So this would be, she was probably in middle school, and the atomic alerts would go. And if you didn't get off the road and get down into the ditch, the cars would come through and they'd literally push you down. But they do the same thing in school. They'd have drills for, the atomic bomb, and they'd get under their desks, and you can go back and you can look at pictures. And so when you had mentioned that to me about this preschool class, I immediately thought of my mom, who would have ever, like, who thinks about that? But then I had a memory. Do you remember? Because we're about the same age. I remember being in like 8th grade and we were having nuclear bomb drills.
And you had to go under your desk.
You had to go under your desk,
Yep.
which was the same thing for the atomic bomb. And I thought, and I'm not, please, those who are listening or watching, I am not likening this situation or in any way diminishing. But my point is that these events create memories and trauma, and hopefully it's preparedness rather than anxiety related to it, if that makes sense. I just remember when my mom had told me, because I came home from school and told her about the nuclear bomb and we were hiding under our desks, and she, in all of her wisdom of now 86 years, said, yeah, we did that for the atomic bomb too. I'm not really sure what the desk was going to do, but we did the same thing, and we'd even do it walking home from school. So it's interesting, this preparation. No one should have to prepare for that. And in particular, 3-year-olds for an active shooter situation.
I kind of want to come back to the whole social media element of this and kind of come back to the idea of what we can control, because I think, look, and to kind of borrow what you were just saying, Jody, I don't want to diminish any other things that people hold close to them. Certainly if you have people in your family that are affected by a certain disease, you may be influenced to want to volunteer your time and donate and do all of the things for those, where maybe I might see that come up in your Instagram feed and say, okay, well, I can donate $25 to that fund, and not. I think these events happen where there's just, we've had, you mentioned it. Think about just in the time that we've started this podcast, with Roe versus Wade coming up recently in the news the way that it has, and an elementary school shooting. I think maybe, look, we could sit here and have a conversation all day long about the pros and cons of social media. That's certainly for sure. I think one of the things that, if we're going to take the positive spin like we like to do on this show, one of the things that I think an event like this does is makes you say to yourself, I can control more than I think I do. I see this person thinking the same way I do, and I see this person thinking the same way I do, and this person's going to their local township meeting this week to talk about everything that's gone on. I look at a guy like Steve Kerr, the head coach of the Golden State Warriors, who had his pregame speech in the Western Conference. They're a Final Four team in the NBA. His whole pregame speech was, we're not talking about basketball. Steve Kerr's father was gunned down, gun violence in Beirut in 1984. So to him, it's a very different thing. And all of a sudden, these incidents tragically, sadly, unfortunately, frustratingly come up. And I know you guys have seen it just as much as I have. There's people that are saying we can control more than we think, and we can get together and do more than we think. And I just, man, it's just, I want to come back to a lot of the things that you and I, that we all have talked about in this podcast, because my daughter is 6. She's in elementary school, and my wife and I are, you're caught between wanting to know what's going on and wanting to know nothing at all, because you're just so shell-shocked by the situation.
And that's normal, Crockett, and that's normal.
It is. And there's I would imagine the vast majority of people probably felt that way as this was unfolding. And why I think it's so important to talk to professionals, to talk to people with expertise, to talk, is the first thing I said to her was, whatever Savvy wants to talk about, we need to come to her level. We don't need to, because like we've talked about in this show before, we know our kid. She's anxious about everything. Okay, so we don't need to pile any anxiety on her.
Right.
If she's got questions about it, let's answer them to the best of our ability. let's try to figure out what she, well, what do you know first, sweetheart? Can you tell me what's going
Yep.
on? And I think this may surprise people listening to the podcast. I am not a doctor, a psychotherapist,
Oh
a
my
therapist at
gosh.
all. I know.
Look at that.
Shocking.
Who would have
I
thought?
know.
Me
I
either.
know. But just like you guys, there's not too many times where I feel like I'm at a loss for words in certain situations. And this was one of those situations. And I think it's just so important to encourage. In the first episode that we talked about was the stigma around therapy and talking to people, and just the things that you may not even know are a part of you, are chewing you, are things that you think about, almost unconsciously think about, are things that if you can just get out on the table,
Yeah.
I think can just it might not be a physical hug, but it's a mental hug. Get out in front of it. If you're feeling something, don't sit with things bottled up. Go and talk to somebody who can help you and get you started in a good direction.
Yeah. You're 200% obviously speaking my language.
First of all, look at him listening and like literally coming back with specifics.
Yeah.
What do you know?
I know he learned.
I know.
I
I'm
feel
so
so
proud.
Listen, and to be, first of all, thank you both. I'm going to give you
You're
10 or
welcome.
15 minutes to cut that out. If we go back to our initial conversations, I will tell, I've been in individual therapy. I've been in family therapy. I've been in grief counseling with a group. I've been in all of these different places, and would hate to think of how I'd feel about certain things if it weren't for those conversations, and knowing that there's people feeling what you're feeling what I was feeling in a moment. And I just think I think there's a lot of stigmas and a lot of doors and a lot of things that people are saying, why are we letting this get in the way? Why can't we knock this down and get to the next thing? And why can't we knock this down and get to the next thing? And of course, there's going to be disagreements. There's going to be not meeting in the middle on things. But man, I gotta feel like the vast majority of people, I'm rolling along here, I'm sorry. I gotta feel like the vast majority of people are saying, what the heck can I do? What can I do on the small scale or the large scale?
So when you were just saying that, I thought here. So you're right, and I think what we can control, yes, ourselves, right? We can never control other people, but I control my thoughts, and I control my behaviors. And when I control my thoughts and I think things through, then I also am in pretty much control of my feelings too, right? But here's what everybody can do today. Turn to somebody that you're around or you're with a lot, or that you know, and say, are you okay? And really listen to them. Are you okay? Not how are you? Are you okay? Because then that lets that person think about the how are you question in a different way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because we're so used to saying, I'm good.
But if I say to you, are you okay?
No.
Right.
No. I mean,
right.
To be perfectly, no.
And then the conversation opens up to, there's really good therapists.
Yeah.
And with 4, 5, 6 sessions, you could be okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we can control, right?
Yeah, we need to learn that.
Right.
And then we need to learn from that. I think some people approach these situations like we've started at the very beginning and said they kind of point fingers and they blame. But there's a whole nother group of individuals who look at this and say, okay, well, what did we learn? What are we going to learn from this? How are we going to move forward from this? And not just individually, what am I going to learn and how am I, but Crockett, you brought up people who are going to township meetings or going to school board meetings. I mean, we also need to learn and we need to change and we need to adapt. We're human beings and we need to do that. I'm not suggesting that we adapt to these situations and accept them. That's not at all what I'm saying. I want to be very clear on that. But I'm saying that there are opportunities to learn from every situation. We do what are called root cause analysis. When something occurs that has a less than optimal outcome in our organization, And when you do a root cause analysis, you're looking at, okay, what happened? What caused it?
And what can we do?
And what can we do about it? And it's, if we could do that for these instances within our, even if it's a mini RCA, root cause analysis in our own life, is to say, look, I need to look at this situation. This is what happened. It happened. What caused it? Not just one piece of it. What were all of the contributing factors? Sure. Everything. And then say, now, how can we do better? What could we have done differently? Here's the strange part of this. Sometimes there's nothing you could have done completely different, but maybe it prepares you for when something starts to look similar, that you go, oh, wait a second. I remember this. Let's change the middle section. Let's change the cause. Or you're impacting the cause so that the root never happens. And we can all do that. We can all do that.
And that's what we do in therapy. Yeah. Right? We do mini RCAs, root cause analysis, every day, all day long.
That's true.
You know, it's kind of what cognitive behavioral therapy is.
What brought you here? That's your root. Let's talk about that. There's your cause.
Yeah.
And then
what was your behavior? Well, how could we kind of look at that differently?
Yeah. See, guys, it's really easy. You just do a little root cause analysis for 4 days, 4 times. But it is something you can do.
It is. And when we reach out to our neighbor, to the next guy, to somebody and say, are you okay? Maybe we're helping that person get some help in preventing something that may have happened that we don't even know about.
So true. You always hear the statement of you never have any idea what someone else is going through. Yeah. And I was on a call yesterday and someone apologized for something that didn't affect any of us, but they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I said, hey, we're psychiatry. We don't judge and we don't talk. Like we don't share and we don't judge. Like you just bring it. You just come as you are. And I think that's, if we could all just accept one another for coming as we are and take the judgment out of it and simply look at one another as human beings, it would change everything. When we talk about, and I'm going to hop back to social media real quick. I always think with social media, what if my mom read that? Like if I wrote something, and I always think like, how would that impact other people who have other experiences? Just being mindful. Yeah. And mindfulness is huge. I think that's maybe something we can talk about really more in depth in the future.
Oh yeah.
Is mindfulness and being mindful and what that does for you when events occur and when things pop up, and how if you practice those things, you're in a very different space. It's pretty impactful when it happens. But I think today we just really wanted to have a conversation about what perhaps next steps can be for individuals, participate in a little RCA and therapy. Yeah. Like that. That was really good, Aim.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah.
I mean, think of the baseline of what this conversation was. How are you doing? And giving a hug. Like, think about the 2 things that we are in incredible control of potentially just saying to someone, how are you? And bring it on in, big guy.
So like, Crockett, we're going to challenge you though. It's not how are you?
It's are you okay?
Okay. So we'll say, are you okay? Okay.
Are you okay?
Because exactly like you said, my response would be, I'm good. If you ask me, am I okay? I will say I'm full of panic. Yeah. Well, listen, the hug, I can give you guys both a virtual hug here, because I think we all certainly could use it. And I hope that people can, if this is your first time through this podcast, hopefully this will encourage you to maybe go back and listen to some of the other conversations that we've had that are, listen, there's certainly heavy things that we've talked about, but this one was very much in a moment, kind of just letting it all hang out. And I hope that if you go back and listen to some of our conversations, that you'll just maybe find a way to maybe start your own and get your own path and find your own way. And find some positive things. So for Jody McCloud Missmer and Amie Alanson Dundon, to you both, I appreciate you both being open and honest, and I wouldn't expect anything else from either of you, but certainly I thought that this was a terrific conversation. So thank you both for today.
Thanks, Crockett. We appreciate it. And just want to let you know, we have a lot of compassion for you and for your counterparts out there who have children right now who are attending school. And we hope that you're able to find some space and some solace and hopefully take away some information from this, because for Amie and I, our children are grown. Your worries change, but certainly understand, but encourage everyone to have conversations that would be helpful.
Yeah. Thank you, Crockett.
I saw Amie give a little, like, yeah, our conversations are a little bit different with these.
They are different. Right? They are different. That's a whole nother podcast.
We'll save that. We'll save that for another time.
Yeah, that's for
not
cable
for
TV.
That'll be the after show. Stick around for that one. It is the Just Start the Conversation podcast. It's brought to you by St. Luke's University Health Network. Amie Alanson Dundon, Jody McCloud Missmer. Always a pleasure, my friends. My name is Kevin Crockett. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Just Start the Conversation podcast.